When you look at your firm's overall profitability, do you struggle to know what you should be doing to improve it? There are 3 ways that you can do this. The first is to peel back layers of data that you likely already have in your firm, or to start tracking that data so that you can then identify actions that you should be taking, and finally, communicate the effect that your team members can have without showing them your P&L statement. So let's talk a little bit about those layers that you can peel back and what you should do when you find an issue in one of those layers. And then finally, how you might communicate that to your team members to take action that makes an impact on your business's profit. As we peel back the layers of what's affecting profitability, the first thing to look at is missed billings. Basically, you want to be able to run a report and see if there's any unbilled WIP or work in progress. That is, labor that you've performed or expenses that you've incurred from your subconsultants or other project expenses that you forgot to or haven't been able to invoice for yet. And if you simply forgot, then you might be able to catch up on the next invoice period or even issue an additional invoice. And if it's something that you're just not able to invoice yet and you're carrying that WIP, you might look at the ways that your projects are set up in terms of timeline or in terms of contract and find out if there are better ways for you to invoice that WIP sooner so that you're not carrying it longer. For either one of those actions, make sure the responsible parties on your team understand the impact of carrying WIP, the cost that you're incurring and paying for, but have not been able to invoice to your client yet. Make sure your project managers understand the importance of sticking to your timelines so you can invoice all of that completed work when the labor is actually incurred instead of carrying it very long. Okay, profitability isn't where you want it to be, and you've already peeled back one layer and determined that there's no unbilled WIP. You're invoicing everything you can. You're not leaving money on the table. So let's peel back another layer to look at what might be causing an issue in profitability. Let's look at utilization, which is just the percentage of time that your team is billable versus non-billable. Now, you should have an easy way to see how utilized your team is and how billable their time was, at least after the fact. You should also have targets established and make sure that those are communicated both to the team members that are logging time and project managers that might have a hand in scheduling them. And it's also important to ensure that your utilization targets are appropriate. That is, that the rate you would charge for somebody's time, even if you're doing work fixed fee, that billable rate or expectation is going to not only cover their salary, but is also going to cover overhead costs that's associated with each individual on the team and still hit the target multiplier you have so that you're hitting your profit goal each time you bill an hour that somebody's worked on a project. Now, there are lots of formulas you can use to figure that out, particularly the overhead. We're not going to get into all that on this video. Suffice to say, you should make sure those utilization targets are not only realistic based on the work weeks that your team has, but are also appropriate to the number of hours they should work at their average rate in order to hit the profit potential that you want to hit. So if you have utilization targets and you know they're the right targets and they've been communicated to your team members, but you're still not hitting the utilization targets, first, look at schedules. Hopefully you are doing scheduling and you can see on your schedule very quickly whether people were scheduled to hit their utilization target. And if they're not, either you simply don't have enough work to schedule people to, which is a sales pipeline problem, or you need to have a conversation with those project managers so they understand how important it is to schedule people to hit those utilization targets. And if people are being scheduled to the targets and you're simply not logging the time to those targets, then you need to either look at what's going sideways on projects and pulling people in other directions than where they were scheduled, or you need to have a conversation with certain individuals by looking at reports of what they were scheduled to work on and what they actually spent their time on so that they understand how important it is to hit those utilization targets on the appropriate projects so you can bill for all the time they're spending and you're not leaving money on the table. Okay, at this point, we've peeled back a couple of layers in terms of profitability to understand what's going on. We made sure that there's no unbilled WIP left on the table that we're not invoicing. We've also looked to make sure that our team is hitting utilization targets and that those utilization targets are appropriate, that they would cover our cost and hit our profit multiplier. So If both of those things look good, it's time to peel back one final layer and look at individual project profitability. You should be able to look at the total revenue that you can bill for people's time as they're completing work versus the cost of every hour they log to the project in both labor and overhead. And for your sub-consultants, this is an easier match. You can look at what you're paying them versus what you're invoicing to the client. Now, so long as you have a system that is tracking as every hour gets logged what the cost is and what the value, potentially billable value of that is, this is fairly easy to examine. You can see as the cost is incurred, you can see the value that's been earned. You can also then see how much you actually invoice to, again, make sure you're invoicing all of the WIP. And at the end of the day, even if you go over your estimates on a project in terms of hours, you should still be able to look back and see if you were profitable to see if that total cost invested was eventually invoiced, and maybe you didn't hit exactly the goal that you had for profitability on the project, but you can still see whether it was profitable overall. If you're looking at the profitability of your firm after the fact and you don't like what you're seeing and you want to know where to make a change, start with these 3 layers. Look first for unbilled WIP to make sure you're not leaving money on the table. And then look at your utilization to figure out if your team, your most valuable resource, is being spent wisely and whether the targets that they should be hitting are well communicated and are the right targets. And then finally, look at the project level accounting to see if people are properly utilized and I'm billing for all of the WIP that I can. What is going on in these projects? Where am I overspending and maybe not able to bill due to lack of budget? And if you don't have a good way to enter in the targets or track as every hour gets logged to your project, how you're doing on budgets and profitability, look for a system that captures that information for you in as automated a way as possible. Look for a system like Factor. You can find out more about us at factorapp.com, where you can sign up for a demo or a free 30-day trial and learn more about how your business could improve profitability through seamless project management, billing, and integration with accounting.